We did turn the lights down, and hopefully that'll help, Phyllis.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're on lesson number 5, although this isn't clicking, so let's try it again. There we go. We've spent the last 4 classes talking about Israel. We looked at Judah, or the Judean area, for the first 2 weeks, and then we looked at Galilee the last 2 weeks. And now we're shifting. We're looking at Jordan. I had a thought. Somebody said, well, you're teaching about the Holy Land. What's the Holy Land, and why did they call it the Holy Land? What do you think the Holy Land is?
Jesus was
Well, okay.
part of it.
Just where Jesus was then?
Probably not.
Maybe it's places that are mentioned in the Bible. And of course, we're going to be moving into Turkey and looking at the 7 churches of Asia that are specifically mentioned in Revelation. But of course, through Acts, we see lots of places in Asia Minor that are mentioned as Paul made his 3 missionary journeys, and then his journey to Rome as he was imprisoned. But I think people think of the Holy Land as just being a place that's maybe way over there, that maybe borders on being fantasy land. And we need to understand, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this class, is this is a real place. The dirt is real, the rocks are real, the trees are real, the people are real. And yet it is a place, as we've shown you before, where we can walk on some of the same stone steps that Jesus walked on. And we can see some of the places that we know Jesus was. And that's inspiring. But it's also inspiring to get to understand Scripture better, as we did last week when Jesus told Peter, on this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. It was amazing that he was at Caesarea Philippi, and he was standing beside this rock mountain that had this cave that was called the gates of Hades. And so that makes it so real. That's why Jesus said what he said when he did. He spoke in parables often, but he was speaking in a way that Peter could understand him and the other apostles. Well, Jordan, you don't think of Jordan as being maybe part of the Holy Land, but let me ask you for a minute. You remember when we studied Joshua and his coming over the Jordan River and conquering the land of Canaan? Maybe you think of the Holy Land as being the Promised Land, but there were 12 tribes, and one of the tribes, Levi, didn't get any land. They were priests, and they got to live in some cities, and they had some garden plots, but they didn't get an area, but the other 11 tribes did. But 2.5 tribes got land east of the Jordan, and that's in Jordan. So that's part of the Promised Land too. So I spent all that time just to convince you we're still studying the Promised Land, or the Holy Land, if you will. Now we're going to get to Petra in a few moments, and that's the reason we went to Jordan. But there's lots of other things there too. And so here's the map. You can see where Jerusalem is. It's just basically even with the top of the Dead Sea. We've talked about going to Jericho before, and it was just across the border of the Jordan River. And you see where Bethlehem is. It was only 7 kilometers from Jerusalem. Things are pretty close there. Dave was asking me tonight, well, how big a country is Jordan? And so we looked it up. Jordan is 34,495 square miles. Texas is 269,000. So do you get a picture that we have states that are bigger than Jordan? And by the way, Israel is only 85,000 square miles. So both of those are relatively small countries. Amman is the capital of Jordan. We actually went by the airport as we crossed just below Jericho, but there are several other places, and I wanted to just give you a preview of some of the places that we're going to be looking at tonight. So there's Jerusalem, and there's the crossing. And I told you we went by the airport at Amman. Well, we're going to go to Bethany, There's another Bethany that was only 2 miles from Jerusalem, but this is Bethany east of the Jordan. And it's mentioned in the book of John, specifically as Bethany east of the Jordan. We're going to go to Medaba, or talk about it anyway, Mount Nebo, and Manchuras. Those may be unfamiliar to you, and yet they're important places as far as things that happen. And we'll be talking about it. Ultimately, we're going to end up way down here in Petra, which is well below where we went when we were over here at, just forgot the name. Sorry about that. The city in South Israel, but we're further down than that. Petra is getting pretty close to the Gulf. The end of Jordan is down there on the water. Okay, so there's a picture that comes out of the map that I have here. It's not a very good map, but again, if you want to look at this map when class is over, feel free. We're leaving Jerusalem now, and there's kind of the final thing you see is you're going out the Jericho Road, and right there's some trees and things, but you've seen pictures already of the Jericho Road, and you see how wild it is and how untamed it is and how difficult it would be to live there. And yet there are people living there all along, and you've seen some examples of people living in these very hills. The nomadic people. And we've seen some similar slides before. They're cattle. It's hard to tell what's a barn and what's a place that they live in, but they do group together more. I'm sorry about that. I didn't intend to do any of that. I need to go back all the way to the front. I don't know what happens to me. All right, I'm back now. So we'll try to take it a little slower. There's just Bedouin, and that means desert people. And they still live here, but they're starting to associate more. They used to live away from each other, and now they live in more clusters or villages. Lots of animals, and animals actually can find something to eat in those hills. Okay, you've seen before that we're going below sea level. Jericho's below sea level. The Dead Sea is well below sea level, and as we saw last week, the Sea of Galilee is below sea level. All along that Jordan Valley, it's a deep valley, if you will. We're approaching the Dead Sea, but we're actually going to go around the Dead Sea. We're going to go over to the east side after we cross the Jordan. They wouldn't let us take any pictures of crossing the Jordan. And I think I've told you a little bit before, our bus had to drive up to the border. We had to get off the bus. We had to walk in and get x-rayed and patted down. And then we got on another bus, which was in the Jordan side. It was a different driver and a different guide. We couldn't have the same driver or the same guide. And so we had a different Jordan guide. Although Jordan and Israel get along, they often don't get along about some things. Jordan in the year 2000 was 20% Christian. And when I say Christian, people that said that they were Christian, Catholic, or a Protestant or whatever, it's less than 2% now Christian. It's amazing. Okay, there's another sign that says we're coming to the Dead Sea. But as I said, we're going to go east of the Dead Sea. We're going around the end of it now. And before we get down to the Dead Sea, we're going to see some other things. Okay, that just reinforces what I already said about the Dead Sea being well below sea level. And there is Bethany, east of the Jordan. And the reason it's famous is because that, according to most scholars, is the place that Jesus went to be baptized by John the Baptist. And I showed you another place that says it's a baptismal site of Jesus just south of the Sea of Galilee. And I told you why I don't believe that's the case. There's a couple of scriptures that we looked at before in Matthew 3 and Mark 1, and it talked about Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee. He wasn't still in Galilee, that implies. And it also says John the Baptist was preaching in the wilderness of what? Judea. And so he wasn't up in Galilee. And so Jesus arrived from Galilee at the Jordan. Well, that is supposedly the baptismal site of Jesus. And it was a prepared area even then in the first century. And there are steps leading down. There was an archway there. There was some other buildings in the vicinity. But this is still the same place, according to scholars. I don't know that, and I'm not sure how they believe that to be the case, except there are some early scholars, Josephus is one of them, that says Jesus was baptized here at Bethany, east of the Jordan. And as I told you in John, the first chapter in verse 28, it specifically says that John the Baptist was baptizing at Bethany, east of the Jordan. There's a artist's conception of the Jordan River, and this was actually a tributary of the Jordan River. That's not a good way to put it. It was a diversion of the Jordan River that came down here to the baptismal area. The Jordan River is not very attractive. It's not clear water. It's muddy water. And you'll see a picture of it in a minute. There are people over on the Israel side. Now, if you have a good memory, we showed you the Israel side the other day. You remember we were at Israel and we were going to Jericho and we stopped on this side and we saw people being baptized there. But that's not the place where Jesus was. He was over maybe 100 yards from there. But in any event, there are lots of people who go there to be baptized, although for some, baptism is a repeat thing that they do over and over again, not just one time for the remission of sins. Some of them may be doing it for the first and only time. I don't know. And that lady's thinking about jumping in. But you can see the water there. It's pretty cloudy. In any event, there's a last look at the supposed baptismal site. Okay, we're moving down, and this is Madaba. Now, actually, we're in Jerusalem there, and that's on the wall in Jerusalem. I had never heard of the Madaba map before. We were scheduled to go to Madaba as we were going through Jordan, but it took us longer to get through customs, if you will, at Jordan than they anticipated. And rather than not be able to see some other things, we did not go to Madaba. But at this church in Madaba, which is the Church of St. George, in the 1800s, as they were cleaning up what was ruins of an old church, on the floor, they found this map. And the part of the map that you saw a minute ago on the wall in Jerusalem is Jerusalem right there. And this map dates from the the 4th century, about 350 AD, the 4th century. And it is the most accurate map that has of old times, and it is the oldest map of Jerusalem ever found. There have been a few maps found since then that are older of other places, but not of Jerusalem. And it's so accurate, you can count the gates, you can count the towers that are in Jerusalem. I had a hard time making sense out of it myself, but it's lettered in Greek and it's very famous. It gets lots of visitors. We didn't get to go there, but you got pictures anyway. So now you know what Madaba is. I just said it was 3rd century, it's 6th century. I stand corrected. If you looked at your outline, you were thinking, why does he say 3rd century? 6th century, okay? It's extremely accurate and detailed, however. Now we're moving on, and we're going to Mount Nebo. Well, some of you will probably know what Mount Nebo is. You remember? It's where God took Moses to allow him to look over into the promised land. That he told Moses, you're not going to be able to go to the promised land. That's Mount Nebo, and it is the tallest mountain around. And so there are a couple of scriptures that talk about it in Deuteronomy 32 and 35. He told Moses it was going to happen. And then in chapter 35, well, he talked about we're going to go up to Mount Nebo to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. Well, that's about right. It's a little above the Dead Sea, although I'm told you can see the Dead Sea on a clear day by looking down. But in any event, that's where Moses was taken by God, and then God buried him, and we don't know where that was. It may have been on Mount Nebo. It may have been somewhere else. But you remember what we talked about when we looked at the transfiguration? Moses did make it to the promised land because he appeared along with Elijah with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. Surely he was a spirit, but he was there, wasn't he? In spirit, at least. So you can look down, and the Dead Sea is actually off there in the distance. And you can see it's pretty rugged territory there off of Mount Nebo. And we're looking at, I think, the same direction a little bit to the south there. It's hard for me to know exactly what's what there, but it's pretty rugged out there. There is a map that I actually took a picture of that shows where different things are. So you can see where Jericho and Jerusalem and Bethlehem are. If it wasn't so smoggy, it's a little hard to see any of those. I don't think we could. But anyway, you get an idea of where we are on Mount Nebo. They built some churches there to remember Moses. There's a museum there, but any event, it was, again, to know that Moses got to stand on that mountain and we were on the same mountain and he got to see the promised land. It's still something that strikes you when it's taking place. Well, we're down off the mountain now, and Jordan, in a large part, is kind of flat land, although they got some big mountains, as you'll see a little later. But we're driving across flat land. It's pretty agrarian in many ways. They have lots of fields where they're growing grass or they're growing crops, and they also have orchards. And so you can see different plants that are planted, different orchards, the way people live. Okay, we're at another location, and if you're following this on your outline, this is Mancharis. How many have ever heard of Mancharis? Well, it's not mentioned in the Bible, although what happened there is mentioned in all four Gospels. There are not very many things that are mentioned in all four, but that was the imprisonment of John the Baptist. And this was Herod's palace. It was built by Herod the Great, but of course he died in about 1 BC, and then his son took over, Herod Antipas. And you know the story because you read Matthew and Mark. You remember that there was a daughter of an important person that was dancing there for the king, that is Herod Antipas. And he appreciated Salome's dance so much that he said, I will give you whatever you ask. And so her mother, whose name was Herodias, said, ask for John the Baptist's head on a platter. And although Herod Antipas was afraid of killing John the Baptist before, since he had made the promise, he had him executed that very night, and his head was brought on a platter. That's what happened at Herodias. I'm sorry, Mancharius. I'll get it right yet. That looks a little bit like Herodias. You remember when we saw that mountain? We saw Herodias that was down by Bethlehem, and it was called Herodias because Herod built it. It wasn't a mountain until he built it, and he built a castle on top. This was already a mountain, and he built a castle on top. He did that a bunch of places. I was interested to know that this is one of 3 places that when Israel was overrun by the Romans in AD 70, Jews went to 3 locations and held out. This was one of them. And what was the one that we saw here 2 weeks ago? Do you remember? 3 weeks ago. I'll think of the name of it in a minute. You remember the mountain that they had to build a dike to get up to? I thought maybe somebody'd remember. Sorry, I'm having a senior moment. That was one of the others, and I don't remember the third place. But when we got there and we could see up there, I wasn't much for walking at the time. I didn't walk except when I had to. And so there were a number of steps to go up the mountain, and Donna went up the mountain and she took some of the pictures up there. So you can see that there are some cave areas there. Those were tombs that have been pillaged, and they're open, of course. But there were lots of remains. You can see some of the pillars of the temple that was there. There's an arch that's still there, and it's a great view up there. You're about 3,600 feet above the Dead Sea, so it's not a real tall mountain, but you're at like 2,500 feet above sea level there. And the palace was actually on the very top of the mountain, and there's a picture of what they believe the palace looked like based upon some diagrams that they found of Herod the Great building it. All right, we're looking down. You can just see how high it is, but I don't think Donna could see the Dead Sea from there, even though it was right down below. It was too cloudy, I guess. Okay, we're back down off the mountain. We're traveling in Jordan again. We're traveling on a highway that's called the King's Highway. It's actually existed since 7 BC. As a matter of fact, it's mentioned in Numbers in the first chapter. We're not going to go there or look at it, but you can look it up if you want. It was a Edom highway. And Moses, when he met the king of Edom, he said, "Can we travel on your highway? We won't go off your road." He was talking about the King's Highway, and the king said no. And so they conquered Edom and took the highway anyway. Okay. But it was a famous road that ran north and south, east of the Jordan. There's a main route for trade. Well, there are just lots of sheep and goats, and there are people out there taking care of them. They call those shepherds. And I'm sure they had interesting stories to tell if we could have understood their language. They speak Arabic, but we didn't have time to stop. But you can see some of the places they live, and they're nomadic. All right, here's our hotel. And if you look down about the old village resort, I was told that this was a favorite place of people that went to Israel and Petra. And I didn't understand too much about it, but the old village resort used to be a village. And it was built in the 1800s, if you look at your outline, and it was still a village until the 1970s. But it was pretty run down, and so it took a few years, and in the 80s, they built a hotel there. And I could give you lots of pictures, but that's not what we came to see, so we'll go quickly through some of that. There are some of the buildings you see, they're made out of stone. That stone was taken from the local area, and this was from the tribe of I'll try to get it right in a minute. I wrote it down, the New Rafla tribe. They built the village. Okay, there were lots of stairs. They didn't have elevators because you were going outside and you go up to your patio, and they usually had some tables, and you could go out to the patio. You can see a patio right there, but our room was up the top of these stairs, and it was a very nice room. They had an old olive press. We've seen olive presses lots of places. They last forever, I guess. They're pretty durable unless somebody takes them apart. Now, we're leaving our hotel and we're going to head to Petra, the old city site. But before we go there, there's another famous place that you can see. Do you see that white at the top of the mountain? It may be hard for you to see. Let's see. Do you see the white right there? Okay, well, that's Mount Hor, H-O-R. Does anybody know what happened on Mount Hor? It's in the Bible. It's not one of the things we mention all the time, but if you look at Numbers chapter 20 and also Numbers 33, it's mentioned that God spoke to Moses and Aaron, and it said it was by the border of the land of Edom. And it said, Aaron shall be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land which I've given to the sons of Israel, because you rebelled against my command. And then in chapter 33, Aaron the priest, he was the high priest, remember? And he was also Moses' brother. He went up to Mount Hor at the command of the Lord and died there and was buried there. That's Mount Hor. Now, that raises lots of issues. We're only a few miles from Petra. We're less than 5 miles from Petra. And some people said, well, did Moses and the children of Israel go to Petra? Well, they didn't go to the city of Petra because it wasn't there then. You remember that Moses was taking people a couple of thousand years before Jesus. And we're going to see that Petra only came along as a city, like in I wrote it down somewhere, I think. Maybe I didn't. It was discovered again in 1812, but we're going to see that Petra didn't come along till about the 6th century BC, if I remember right. But I did take that picture too, either I or Donna. It's a little closer. You can see it a little better, maybe not too good. So I just went online and I got somebody used a telephoto lens, but that's a little blurry, but that's the best picture I could find to bridge the gap. And then we're seeing another one that's taken from the air. Again, not the best quality in the world. And then finally, there is the tomb of Aaron, according to local beliefs. All right, we're at Petra now, and this is the main gate, if you will, at Petra. Had any of you heard of Petra before I said we were going to look at Petra? Some of you have. It is one of the 7 modern, what do we call them? 7 wonders of the modern world. It's one of them. The Taj Mahal is another, and the Wall of China is another, but this is one of them. And you'll see why in just a moment. We were waiting to go in. Now, I told you I was having a little trouble walking, so my wife didn't want me walking in. It's about a mile, a little over a mile, to walk from this place into the main court area of Petra, where the treasury is that you'll see in a moment. But they had golf carts, and 3 people could ride with the driver in the golf cart. You had to pay to do that, and you got a ticket where you could get back as well after you decided to come back. So I decided that I would, reluctantly, I would ride. That's somebody's idea of the Petra. I think that was at a store that we're going to see a little later. But I'm in the cart now, and we're starting to drive down this lane, and there are lots of people walking, and there are already tombs and carved caves, if you will. There are lots of interesting things. Do you see up there? There are 7. That's not right. There's not 7. There are 3 pyramids. And then there's something else, and I don't remember what that is, but there are 3 pyramids. And that represents 4 people that are buried there. There's 3, and then there's something for the other person. This was one of the kings of Petra that was buried there, but this is outside the area you think of as being downtown Petra. This is the suburbs, if you will. There's another picture of the same thing. Actually, it looks to me like there are 4 pyramids there. There are 3 and then the taller one. So there were 4 people that were buried there. Those tombs have been raided, of course, and they're open. I guess you could go in them, but we didn't. I was on this cart as we went by. I could take a few pictures. And there is just some more scenery. And we're going to see that there are lots. I don't know what the significance of the steps that there is, but that's another tomb. Yes, ma'am.
Can you go back one? The picture, what was the image on the front of the Petra? Is that a horse? They're standing or rearing up, or is that?
I don't know.
Is it any animal?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If there was a horse there, I didn't see it then and I don't see it now, but maybe you can see something that I didn't. There's a brochure here and it does have a picture of that and you can come read about it. I don't think it mentions a horse. But that last picture you see in the background, there are caves all over the place there. And most of those were burial areas. Another area, this was probably all part of one mountain at one time, but it's been carved. And they carved it a lot. Petra is also called the Red Rose City. And the reason it's called Red Rose is because of the red rock that they carved so many buildings out of. Now, Donna was walking in with the group. I told you I was riding in. It didn't take me very long to get in, except we had to slow down for people. There were people going and coming. But you may have heard of Petra before. Some of you have. And if you did, you probably also heard that as you walk into Petra, you're walking in this narrow valley that has tall sides, both sides. And you're walking down this narrow area. Well, that was great for them because it also they could protect it so armies couldn't really move down there. It was so narrow. There's another interesting thing along the walls, and you can't see it very well. And I'm not an expert on this, but there are channels where water ran. These guys were experts at moving water because they needed water in the city. And on both sides, there are channels. I don't see one there, but there is one there. I think we'll see it in another picture on both sides. Well, there's a big channel there. I think there were two channels on both sides. You see that channel right there? And then there was a channel there, and I think there was one down a little lower on the other side. So that's looking up. Sometimes the canyons are really tall. Just another picture to show you the size. If you get claustrophobic, you might be claustrophobic, except you can always look up and see blue sky. Or cloudy skies, I guess, is the weather may be. So they're moving down. It really doesn't veer off to the side. It's pretty direct. Moving down. I can't tell you what that is, but you can see that it was carved and it's probably representing something important. It was probably homage to one of the rulers. And you see that it has the pillars up the top, but I can't tell you the significance of that. I'll get to it in a moment. We were going to spend more time as we came out being able to look at this and maybe take some more pictures, although I was riding the golf cart, supposedly coming back. Sometimes plans change. All right. I don't know what happened to the rest of that guy, but you see on the left, his feet, and this guy's feet doesn't look like he was ever fully carved, but you can see the water channel running behind that as well. And there are people, again, if you look, you can just see the first view of the temple. I'm sorry, it's not the temple, it's the treasury. And that's the most famous building in Petra. And we're getting there. So I was reading a tour guide brochure, and it said, get your camera ready, because when you first see the treasury, you want to be sure and get a picture, because it's pretty awesome. You get the picture with the canyon you just moved into. Okay, there's a little closer picture. And so Donna was on the ball, and she got the first picture and then this picture as we move a little closer and a little closer.
So Gary, was water ever, did they ever speculate that water was running through that canyon, the narrow canyon? Because it kind of reminds me of in Arizona, there's called the Antelope Canyon and things like that. And you know, you've got these, or even in Mount Zion,
I'm told,
Utah, they've got.
I'm told that after the city was built, they had some flooding problems and they built a dam to keep from the city being flooded. But my understanding was that dam was not on this location. The water that ran down this was on the sides, but there was running water there all the time because it was water from back where we came from that came in. I don't think this flooded, but I may be mistaken. They had some flooding problems, but they built a dam to take care of it. Okay, there is the first full picture of the Treasury building. You used to could go in it, but when we were there, you could not go in it. So people have to stand on the outside and look in. They said that there was too much damage by people going in. And when you touch things, the oil of your hands makes the rock start to decay after thousands of people go there. There are over 1 million people a year that visit Petra. And so that would be a lot of people touching with their oily hands. There's a couple of those people. In any event, you can see the guy riding the camel in the back. Those camels just went in circles, but they had people coming in on camels, on donkeys, and on golf carts, as I explained to you. Now that's looking off to the right of where we were. I call this kind of the square. It's not really square, but there are a bunch of buildings. All of these buildings, I'm told, were tombs. This was a tomb area. Actually, downtown is a little further down the road. And off to the left, there's another canyon and there are buildings all the way as far as you can see there, but there are also lots of people selling different things in those booths. I didn't go down there, but that was off to the left. That's off to the right again, and you could actually walk in that and walk up and get a little higher if you wanted to climb some steps. I didn't do that. You could climb there, and there are people climbing on. It's hard to see, but they're climbing on. That's not working very good. There. They're climbing there, and they go clear on up. Oh, those are the people I was referring to, I guess. You can see them a little better. You can see where they're going up there to look down. Okay. This was discovered, as you see on your outline, in the early 1800s, 1812. It had been lost for a long time. And one of the questions has been all along, why did it die out? Well, there was an earthquake that struck at one point, and I'm getting mixed up now as to whether that was the 3rd or the 6th century, but it was a long time ago in BC. And also, the trade routes that they previously had that brought them by Petra on the King's Highway was no longer the main trade route. They traveled instead by water for the most part. In any event, when it was discovered, there were people that said, okay, this is the treasury. And by the way, it might have been the library instead of the treasury, but it's always been called the treasury, but there's no indication that there were any vaults or any monies that were kept in the treasury building. But some people thought if it's a treasury, there must be treasure there somewhere. So they looked all through. And if you look up at the top, and I'm sorry, my pointer's, oh, it's working better now. Right there, and right there, and right there. Those figures are all full of bullet holes. And there were people that had machine guns that fired bullets there to try to find where the hidden treasure vaults were. They didn't find any. Those are solid. They're not hollow. They were not able to penetrate it. Thought that was interesting though. Treasury ought to have treasure. There's another close-up. See all the bullet holes? Okay. Yes, sir. Ma'am. Sorry. Do I know who built it? Yeah, it's people that were called the Nabateans. Nabatearens. Nabateans. They were the people that built all this. And most of what you see are tombs. because they built the city out of regular construction, wood or stone that they piled on top of stone. Most of that's gone. What remains is the carvings inside the walls, and most of those were tombs. But we were told it was about 1.5 miles down to where we could have a meal, and that was down where the main city used to be. And I said, I can walk that. They didn't have golf carts going there. You could ride a burro or a camel, and I didn't choose to do that. So I thought we were doing pretty good. And we walked and saw lots of things. Well, we were going to walk back and see more later. Plans don't always work out, but you can see how tall some of these buildings that were carved out of rock were. It's just amazing. And yet this stone is ideal for carving. I'm told that it's brittle enough that you can carve it, but it's strong after you carve it, and it doesn't fall apart. That's why it's been there for 2,000 years. More tombs, even up on the wall there.
Did they find bodies?
No, ma'am. That was all had already been raided before, and it was probably raided when it was ceasing to exist as a city. Okay, there's some people on camels. Yes, sir. It's not, it's a sandstone.
It's a sandstone.
Yes.
Okay.
And I thought sandstone was more sandy, but
I figured it'd be like the sandstone down in Tenino with the sandstone quarry down there.
well, it may be.
Because that, you can build blocks
Yeah.
and stuff out of it, and they built buildings out of that down in Tenino.
Yeah, on our third lesson, we looked at caves that existed. There were sandstone, and I'm told it wasn't the sandy sandstone. It was the brittle sandstone, and they used it for building. You remember when they came in from the top and carved out those caves that we saw? I think this is the same kind of sandstone. It's not brittle. Well, it is brittle, but it's strong. It's not powder. So there are remnants of stairs and all kinds of things. You can see up above, there are just tombs everywhere. Now we're looking down toward what is the main city, and that was the gates of the city down there. And that was actually looking down, and off to the right, there was another temple. And I'm sorry I didn't get all the details about this, but this was not just a burial area, it was a temple, and we're going to see another temple here in a moment. There were several temples here to different gods. That's another picture of it. You can see it's got all kinds of stories to it. And niches clear up at the top. There are niches up there, so I don't really know what all's there. And we didn't have the time to explore any of that. There were people almost everywhere, though. When you look, they had climbed rocks and gone all kinds of places. Some people probably spend days there. This is an amphitheater, and it would hold several thousand people. You can see it's not in the best shape any longer, but you can get the idea of the amphitheater, and the stage would be down just in front of where we're standing. But it looks like they had the light room up above there. That's kind of what it looks like. I don't know whether somebody stood up there or that was a tomb. I don't know. But again, an interesting thing to see the hundreds or thousands of people that would have sat there for different presentations. There are mountains everywhere on both sides. And Donna likes to take pictures, and she gets things that I probably wouldn't even see, but she's taking pictures of it. There are goats clear up on the top of those mountains, and she saw some of them. You can see some there. They're a little hard to see, but they're that one goat. He's right there on the edge. There are goats all along here. I don't know who feeds them. Maybe they take care of themselves. I don't know where they get water, but there they are. And there were people riding burros. You've seen the people riding camels. And we're approaching the city gates again. And so this is another temple. This was one of the main temples that was just inside the city gates. And when you get there, you can look into the doorway of the temple. There were double walls in the temple, and we don't know why for sure there were double walls. You have one wall and then you have another wall about 4 feet inside. But anyway, that's looking at that temple, what's still standing of it. Now, Donna had planned, because we were told that there was a monastery that if you were robust, you could walk to. They said that there were more than 800 steps to go to the monastery. Well, you can guess that I chose not to go there. But Donna was going to go there after lunch. There are some of the steps there, and I got these off the internet because she didn't go there. And so she couldn't take those pictures. There's some more of the steps that go on up to the monastery. And finally, there's the monastery. It looks quite a bit like the Treasury building, doesn't it? And I actually hadn't done any studying to see what that looked like before I started doing this presentation, but I got all these off the internet. There are lots of people that go there, lots of robust people, apparently. In any event, she didn't make it. The reason she didn't is as we were having lunch, I got to feeling really faint. You remember the other day when I was teaching class and I got faint? I often know that that's a danger signal. And I said, I need to go somewhere and sit down. I was sitting at the table, but I actually wanted to go lay down somewhere. So I got up and I walked about 25 feet and I fainted, fell over. And so I got lots of attention. We had at least 4 doctors in our group. And this was the Petra group, which is not the same group we toured the rest of Israel with. There were a few of them, but some of them had been in the earlier Israel tour, and Petra was in the middle of that tour and the tour we took. But in any event, our guide said, we're going to get you out of here. And they arranged for a man who worked there, who had a pickup, to drive us out. And so we got to see part of Petra that nobody else ever gets to see as they visit. It's because we went out the back way on a gravel road that became a paved road. Boy, this guy drove like crazy. If I had known how he was going to drive, I don't know whether I would have gone or not. We were holding on for dear life as we drove along and looking right down over the edge. But we're seeing part of Petra that nobody else sees. This is the backside of Petra. And I think we have somebody passing there, and he appeared to be driving just like we were. In any event, they did get us out, and they got us all the way back to our hotel. And we did see a few more tombs as we were going. But Donna didn't get to go up to see the monastery, and we didn't get to see things that we missed before as we were walking in. But I was very thankful to get taken back. I wasn't in any condition to walk that 1.5 miles back to get on the golf cart. I gave my ticket to somebody else, so he got to ride the golf cart back. Anyway, there's a picture again of our hotel that I say it's a picture. Somebody drew that, but it's a very pleasant place to stay. It's one of the top rated hotels to stay in the area. I'm glad we got to see it, stay there. And there's one last look at Mount Tabor as we're leaving with Aaron's tomb. Okay, that says Jordan's royal wedding, and it says 1/6/23. Well, that doesn't mean January 6th. It means June the 1st. And we were there on May the 27th. And so we're 4 days away. And everywhere you go, there were signs. And so there was a royal wedding for the son of the king of Jordan. And this is a ruling family. They're called the Hashemites. And they've been rulers since 1921. Jordan was under the British Empire, and then it got its independence in 1946. And I'll show you the grandfather of this young man in a moment, but this is King, or I should say Prince Hussein. That name may sound familiar to you. And so there's another sign that talks about that. I had to go online because I wanted to know more about this. Did the wedding take place? Yes, it did. And there it is. And so Prince Hussein marries Wajwa Al Sharif, who is a member of a Saudi and Arabian royal family. And she is an architect, went to college and got her architectural degree at Syracuse. Prince Hussein went to Georgetown, graduated in 2016. So they both have some American background. Jordan has always been a friend of the United States in modern times. And there were lots of people there. So Andrew and what's her name, his wife? From England.
Oh,
Prince Andrew and his wife were there. Joe Biden's wife was there. Ruling families from Sweden and Norway were there. Members of ruling government families from all kinds of European cities. It was a big thing. So there's a picture. That's the king over here. His name is King Abdullah. And that's his wife there. King Abdullah's wife is, I've got it written down here somewhere, Rania, and she's from Kuwait. And she's been married to him since 1997. He's been king since 1999 when his father died. And his father, we'll show in just a minute. They don't use just a little knife to carve the cake, but of course it's a little bigger than the normal also. There's King Hussein. Most of us remember him. My vintage, we remember him because King Hussein of Jordan was one of the big advocates of peacekeeping. And when Israel was having the different wars and the Palestinians were fighting them, actually he took over, Jordan took over part of the West Bank, which is now Palestinian, but then they gave it back to Israel. And he was one of the first people to sign the peace treaty between Israel and Palestine. And he promoted peace. So that's one of the reasons most of us remember him. Okay, this says it's Petra Complex, but it's a store. And we went there when we were coming and we went there when we were leaving. I'm sorry that light went off. There's nobody over there to wave at it, but I'm told this book is good. I've looked it up on the internet. You can order it for $22, but it takes you 6 weeks to get it. There's only 4 places that sell it, and they're all in Jordan. And you can get it by mail order. But it talks about a lot of the Christian locations. That tree is a famous tree for Jordan, representing Jordan. Donna, you remember what it's called? Is that the tree of life? The tree of life. And you see depictions of that. They do it in wood and they do it in watercolors and all kinds of places. They put it on jewelry. There's just a lot of the things in the store. I thought you'd be interested in seeing some of those. Comes from chairs to all kinds of boxes and containers. I think those are smoking apparatus up there. But lots of things. Okay, we're moving out. And again, we're headed back on the King's Highway. And you can see that's wheat growing there. They grow lots of things. And you can see that there are lots of people that live in houses. But there are the Bedouins again. There are sheep again. There's a lot of the sheep, the shops, which you will see along streets that are just kind of open. I don't know how they control people going in there at night because they're mostly open. They may have somebody that lives there. I don't know. But those are, you often see shops like that. Some of them have doors. That one does, but many of them don't really seem to have any doors. And there they are drinking tea, but that only 2 guys appear to have glass cups there. They have water cups too. We're going to see more about people drinking when we get to Istanbul. You'll see that serving people tea, they do it on the sidewalks in a real interesting way. Okay, so you see lots of mosques and you see lots of things that I don't know what they are for sure. Whether that's a play area or what that's under the tent. I got this off the internet, and this was a picture of the King's Highway. I didn't see that camel, and I don't remember seeing that rock, but they say this is part of the King's Highway, and they talk about traveling from Amman up north. Remember, we saw the airport as we went by, all the way down to Petra. There's another picture of the King's Highway. And I think if I can hit the right button, you'll just see some of the scenery. That's a valley that leads down to the Dead Sea. And we did go back to Jericho. And I don't know whether Donna, I guess Donna took this picture, but they do have traffic circles, as you can see. And we only went to the edge of Jericho. This is the suburb. We didn't go into Jericho at this time. We had been to Jericho another time. Actually, it was a time to come up. And there we are back in Jerusalem, as you'll recognize the golden dome of the mosque there in Jerusalem. And so that's it, folks. Don, can you turn on the lights over there? At least do the backlight if you can, where it's not too bright on people. That's great. Yeah. We don't want to blind people with it being too bright. I already am, Phyllis. Sorry. We got just about 2 minutes. Questions?
When you went into Jordan, did you have to have identification?
Yes.
Our passport.
Yeah. They looked at our passports. I think they photographed them, but it was modern. You go up there and you have a picture. They take your picture and then you hold your passport where they also get it scanned. But yes, ma'am, we had to do that. Yes.
Gary, did you know, I see wheat fields and stuff like that. Was there any irrigation any place?
I did not see any
I'm
irrigation.
not surprised. I just wondered.
And it's a pretty arid country, so I'm not sure how they get things to grow, but. All right, any other questions? Next week, we're going to move to Turkey and we're going to go to Istanbul. And as I told you before, you may not read about Istanbul in the Bible, but Istanbul had a whole lot to do with the spread of Christianity in the first century. And we're going to look at some of those things and some pretty amazing things to see, like the church that was built in 316 AD, the largest building in the world at the time it was built, and it was a Christian church. But we'll get to see that and many other things next week. So I hope you'll all be here then. Would you bow with me?